Hey, Steve Zucker, welcome back to Folks Who Channel. Hey, I know somebody's going to email me and say, oh, you know, E13 is not a tonic chord. I know that. That's the whole point. In fact, I had this discussion with Ronnie Benson years ago. I went up to, it was GIT back then. Now it's called Musicians Institute. And I was showing him my Modern Chord Cycles for the guitar book years ago. And I explained to him how I had a little criticism from some of my explanations that were kind of breaking the rules. And he goes, well, that's the whole point. And it was so nice to hear that. He was the managing director at the time of the GIT, which is now Musicians Institute in North Hollywood, and he had studied actually with Howard Roberts himself, but he totally agreed with me. It's all about breaking the rules and not being confined to the rules, because great music doesn't flow from rules. So I just want to make that point, because I was showing the example, and I know somebody's going to email me about this. I was showing the example on my Cycle 1 from my book, and I was showing how I was making some changes to it, and then I went to here, okay, and I think I called that the tonic. I know that the C is a 5 chord, right, in F. I know that, okay? That's the whole point, folks, is that you can make changes. It's, to be honest about it, it's a little hard to show my cycles and my studies and talk at the same time. But I just want to make this point. That's the whole point, is you don't have to be restricted to, you know, rules, okay? You can change chords. In fact, when I took from Horace Hatchett 4 times, he taught Howard Roberts how to play. Howard Roberts is the guy that started the GIT, that started Musicians Institute, and Howard Roberts took, when he was a young man, from Horace Hatchett. Horace Hatchett taught him, who was my teacher 4 times, and I market the secret Horace Hatchett files. Horace Hatchett used to talk about, and he was one of the greatest guitar minds on the planet, he used to talk about making changes with chords, whether even in standards, you know, and that's the whole point, is you got to experiment and not be confined by the rules. Because if I take this cycle here, and now here I'm at in the major 13 flat 5, and if I were to go to a, you know, right, that's awful boring, right? So the whole idea is you learn to hear where things want to go, and then not worry about whether it's a tonic or a secondary dominant or a flat 5 sub or, you know, whatever it might be. However, knowing the 10 systems, let me say this, knowing the 10 systems of improvisation kind of gives your musical mind, you know, like food, so to speak. But what I'm trying to say is, when you get down to the point where you're hearing where something wants to go, you don't want to define it. You don't want to analyze it. It's just going to slow things down. So I just want to make that point, because like I said, I'm more, even John McLaughlin said any chord can follow, any chord can follow any chord. And when you think that way, see how that goes with the dominant, right? Then that can resolve. Shading. So I just wanted to make that point, because you know, the Cycle 1 is more about connecting chords and discovering. It's about waking up your musical ear. So that's why, you know, you can't be afraid. You can't. Great music, if you analyze standards, you know, it doesn't stick right to strict diatonic form where the, you know, the 1 chord's always major 7 2. You know, great music combines musical forms. That's the whole point, folks. Great music combines musical forms. Sure, you have an artist like Bach or something like that will stick to a lot of diatonic things, but really at the end of the day, and even Joe Pass, it's the idea, it's important, not the definition. If you get hung up on definitions, if you get hung up on being too analytical, it's going to just greatly slow down your progress. You need to think with your ear, not your head. Okay? So I wanted to make that point, because I know somebody's going to probably watch the last video and say, well, you called this a tonic and it's a dominant chord, so that would be a 5 chord in F. Yeah, I know that, okay? I was going with my ear, okay? So anyway, but that's the whole point, is changing chords and listening to where, and I had that, I like that. Now let's change it again. I mean, that's the whole, the way that you practice is either going to give you quantum leaps or keep you about the same, maybe a little bit of progress. But to be honest about it, folks, and I'm not trying to sound like an ego trip here, but it's really true. Let me move this back a little bit. Most of the guitar instruction material out there is pretty basic stuff, and it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's taken me 40 years to come up with the guitar ladder system. And it's because I combine elements, because you learn the 10 systems of improvisation in a musical way through my chord studies and single note studies, that you absorb how it sounds. You absorb how it sounds to use, you know, like let's say, okay, I know I'm doing a lot of shifting here today. You absorb how it sounds, for instance, to use contrary motion. Hear that? And so it's the sound and getting that in your head so you can, like Larry Coryell said, you can get a sound in your head you can find on the guitar. So that's why it's really important. Now, I mean, there's lots of things that are valid, but really, I mean, through teaching for over 40 years, I've discovered that the most important thing is to get around your instrument in chordal studies, because that is what really feeds your musical head and makes your ear hungry. And then the really cool thing is, even when you're not playing guitar, your subconscious mind's going to be kind of putting the pieces of the puzzle together, because I present that information to it in a way that it just naturally feeds it. It's like a fish jumping in water and swimming, because my chord studies automatically teach things like this teaches smooth voice leading. You know, you can just tell, you know, all the intervals are nice and close. So cycle 1 teaches, cycle 1 from the guitar ladder system is also cycle 1 in the book, teaches smooth voice leading, and then you learn about shading, adding that chord, right? And then when you find something that works. So it's a lot of learning guitar is learning to not put yourself in a box of rules, and learning how to practice in a way. And it's really the material that you practice, the material that you, most of the stuff out there. It's hard for me to really be this bold, but everybody's telling me the same thing, and I'm sick of kind of hiding behind, you know, trying not to. I don't want to come off arrogant or whatever. I give God, the universe, most of the credit. But most of the guitar material out there, they haven't put 40 years of research into it. It's very average stuff. It's a little of this, a little of that, a little of this. You need to have a system. Here's one cycle that really shows. When you get around your guitar in beautiful chords and kind of musical sentences, and you incorporate the 10 systems of improvisation, it just flows into your musical ear. Great music and your ability to hear your own musical thoughts is not going to come from rules, regulations, and putting yourself in a box of analytical stuff. Your music, your ability to hear your musical thoughts is going to come from waking up your musical ear. So I just wanted to make those points, okay? So that was cycle 1, and then we changed it. Now I could go from there, do a cycle with it to the major third. That's a nice sound, right? Nice smooth voice leading, small interval skips. So we got the 7, sharp 9, flat 13 to major 13, flat 5. Repeat. Hear how nice that sounds. You find something that works, milk it, or you could go. Come in with a, let's call that's a hard chord. Bichord. Bichord, it's like this form that I just did. It combines a minor 7 and a major 9. So that's a beautiful chord. And that has that nice lush. Has a really nice sound, right? So when you start working the guitar ladder system, you just automatically begin to wake up the musical ear. And it's not going to happen with average guitar instruction material. You know, average material just is a little of this and a little of that. It's not going to happen. You need to learn musical sentences, and that's going to wake up your musical ear. So I just wanted to make those points. And like I said, I remember years ago in my lessons, I'm 62, in my early, I took from Horace Hatchett, I think, 4 times in my life. I started when I was about 16 or 17, but I remember he used to talk about that, is going through like standards and starting to change the chords and things like that. And it was a fascinating discussion, because he understood the fact that, you need to kind of change colors and experiment. And when you make a change, then that pulls in a couple other new directions onto the table, and then you explore those. And that's how you come up with great arrangements and come up with interesting ideas. You know, I mean, sure, it's good to play a standard, you know, kind of by the book. But a lot of people have told me that have heard me play at trade shows and stuff. They said, well, you know, I'm a pretty good player, and they were. But they said they feel that their standards and the way they play chord melody is kind of boring, and they asked me for a couple ideas on what to do. And that's the trick, is if you love playing standards, man, the guitar ladder system, which really is for advanced players and intermediate players, the guitar ladder system will allow you to learn how to add some nice shading and color to your standards without getting in the way, and just make them more interesting, and still, you know, still retain the soul of that great song. But it will allow you to come up with arrangements that will really be sweet and be interesting and not be boring. All right, folks, take care. For free guitar ladder information and samples, send me an email to pokesue@gmail.com. All right, take care and keep the faith.